I want you to picture the exact second my mother's hand connected with my wife's face. The dining room went silent except for the sound of it. Sharp, flat, final, and then my mother's voice cracking through the quiet like something breaking. You'll always be nothing. Take your kid and leave. Elena didn't cry. She just stood there, one hand pressed to her cheek, staring at the woman who'd never once called her by name without a sneer attached to it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw a chair. I set down my napkin, walked to the coat closet, and started packing our bags. Let's rewind. 10 days earlier. My name is Nathan Cole, and until that Christmas, I was my mother's perfect son. Diane Cole built Cole Associates from a one-room drafting office into the most respected architecture firm in Crestwood, and for 34 years I'd been the son who never disappointed her. Valedictorian, junior partner, the one she introduced at galas as my Nathan, he designed the Whitfield Library expansion. My sister Brooke got the leftover pride. She'd married young, moved 2 towns over, and my mother treated her visits like inconveniences that happened to include grandchildren. I used to think that made Brooke and me allies. I was wrong about a lot of things that December. Elena Marsh, Elena Cole, now, came into my life 4 years ago holding a tray of cardamom rolls at a farmer's market stall she ran herself, and I fell for her before I ever learned her last name. She built her bakery, Marsh Rye, from a folding table into a storefront with a line out the door most Saturdays. My mother met her exactly twice before the wedding and decided, apparently permanently, that Elena was a woman who'd married up and should be grateful for the privilege. She bakes bread, Nathan, my mother said once, like it was an accusation. I laughed it off then. I don't laugh anymore when I think about how long I let that slide. 10 days before Christmas, my mother called to confirm we were still hosting the extended family dinner at her house, and to remind me, not ask, remind, that Elena would be bringing the desserts again this year. Free of charge, obviously. It's good exposure for her little shop, my mother said, and I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the one where I wanted to defend my wife, and instead found myself saying, sure, Mom, we'll figure it out. Elena, when I told her, just nodded and started a list. That was Elena's way. She absorbed things quietly and kept moving, and I told myself that meant she was fine. I was wrong about that too. 8 days before Christmas, my mother asked me to stop by the office to discuss succession planning, which at Cole Associates meant one thing. She wanted to talk about who'd run the firm when she finally stepped back. I assumed it would be me. I'd assumed it for over a decade. Instead, she spent 40 minutes explaining why she was bringing in an outside managing partner, a man named Gary Simmons, to professionalize operations, and somewhere in there she mentioned, almost as an aside, that my current salary reflected family consideration and might need to be brought in line with market rate going forward. I left her office with a headache and a feeling I couldn't name yet, though I know the name for it now. It was the first small tremor before the earthquake. 6 days before Christmas, Brooke called me, and her voice had an edge I didn't recognize. Has Mom said anything to you about the house? She asked. Our grandmother's house, the one our mother inherited and always talked about eventually splitting between us, had apparently been quietly retitled solely into our mother's name 2 years earlier, something Brooke had only just discovered through a property records search she'd done on a whim. I told her I hadn't known. I hadn't. That was the moment I started keeping what I privately started calling my ledger. Not a real document yet, just a mental one. A running tally of every place my mother's stated values and her actual behavior didn't match. 6 days out, the ledger had 3 entries. It would not stay at 3. 5 days before Christmas, Elena came home from a 12-hour day at the bakery to find a text from my mother waiting on her phone. A photo of a 3-tier dessert display from some magazine. No caption except this would work well for Christmas, don't you think? Nothing too rustic this year. Elena showed it to me without a word, just handed me the phone and went to start dinner. I texted my mother back myself. I said Elena had a full schedule and would bring what she could. My mother's reply came fast. I'm sure she can manage. It's one dinner. I stood in our kitchen holding that phone and felt something in me go quiet and cold in a way it hadn't before. For days before Christmas, Brooke came over without warning, sat at our kitchen table, and told Elena and me something that reframed everything I thought I understood about my family. She'd been digging, first out of hurt about the house, then out of something closer to fear, and she'd found paperwork suggesting our mother had been in talks with an estate attorney about restructuring her will entirely around firm equity. cutting Brooke out almost completely on the theory that Brooke's husband, a schoolteacher, didn't need the money the way the firm did. Brooke wasn't coming to me as competition anymore. She was coming to me as someone who'd finally run the same numbers I had and landed on the same uncomfortable answer. Our mother didn't distribute love, she distributed value, and she'd priced Elena at 0 from the start. 3 days before Christmas, I asked my mother directly, over the phone, why the house had been retitled without telling either of us. She didn't deny it. She said, simply, I didn't think it was relevant to explain every decision I make with my own assets. When I asked why Elena's bakery was exposure, but my architecture was a career, she went quiet for a moment, then said the thing that finally, fully opened my eyes. Some people bring value to this family, Nathan, and some people are just additions. I didn't answer her. I hung up the phone, sat down across from Elena, and finally told her everything. The house, the will, the salary conversation, all of it. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said only, I've known what she thinks of me since the engagement party. I just didn't think you'd let yourself see it. That sentence has stayed with me longer than almost anything else that month. 2 days before Christmas, I called Brooke, and for the first time in either of our adult lives, we made an actual plan together instead of quietly competing for our mother's approval. Brooke had copies of the property records. I had, thanks to 8 years as junior partner, my own access to firm financial statements. And one late night at the office, I finally let myself really look at them, not as Diane Cole's son, but as someone checking a number. What I found didn't need footage or a witness or a confession. It was right there in black and white in the ledger, the real one this time. A pattern of firm funds routed through a line item labeled consulting fees that traced back, quarter after quarter, to a shell account tied to my mother's new managing partner hire, Gary Simmons. Payments that had started months before he'd officially joined the firm, back when he was still, on paper, an external consultant she'd brought in without board notice. It wasn't proof of anything criminal necessarily, but it was proof my mother had been making major, self-interested moves about the firm's future, and by extension mine, for a year without telling me a single word of it. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I just made copies. The night before Christmas Eve, Elena stayed up past midnight finishing a dessert table for a dinner she no longer wanted to attend, because that was who she was. She finished what she started, even for people who'd never once finished anything for her. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching her work, and for the first time I let myself feel the full weight of every small moment I'd waved away over 4 years. Every she bakes bread, Nathan. Every dessert table demand. Every time I told myself my mother just needed time to warm up to her. 4 years is not warming up. 4 years is a pattern, and I'd spent 4 years calling it a phase. Christmas Eve, my mother texted the family group, chat a seating chart for the dinner. Elena was seated at the far end of the table, past the children, next to Brooke's mother-in-law, whom Elena had met exactly once. I looked at that chart for a long time. Then I closed my phone, and I told Elena we'd sit wherever we wanted when we got there. She smiled, small and tired, and said, It's just one dinner, Nathan, echoing my mother's own words back at me without meaning to, and something in my chest cracked wide open. Christmas Day arrived, cold and bright, and we drove to my mother's house with 2 trays of desserts Elena had made anyway, because she is a better person than the family she'd married into deserved that year. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, the same as every Christmas of my childhood, and for a moment I let myself hope the day might just be a day. It was not going to be just a day. My mother greeted Elena's desserts before she greeted Elena. Brooke caught my eye across the room, and I understood we were both watching the same clock now, waiting to see how far our mother would go. Dinner started fine. It did not stay fine. My mother made a toast to family and legacy, and raised her glass toward me specifically, toward the son carrying this family forward, and did not so much as glance at Elena during the entire toast. Elena said nothing. She just quietly refilled water glasses down the table, the way she always did, the way that had somehow become her role at every family gathering. Not guest, not daughter-in-law, just help. I watched my sister's jaw tighten. I felt my own doing the same. It was dessert that broke it. My mother stood to serve the tiered display Elena had spent that entire night before finishing, and one of my young cousins, maybe 8 years old, reached for a slice before the plates were passed. My mother swatted his hand lightly, laughing, saying, "Wait for the adults, sweetheart." And then, apropos of absolutely nothing except 4 years of quiet contempt finally finding its exit, she turned to Elena and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Careful, everyone. I hear these get a little dense when they're rushed. Not everyone has time to do things properly." The table went quiet. Elena, calm as ever, said only, "I made those with 2 hours of sleep, Diane. I'm sorry they're not up to your standard." My mother's face changed. And that was when it happened. My mother's hand came up, and it landed across Elena's cheek, hard enough that the sound of it silenced the entire room, and her voice cracked out after it. "You'll always be nothing. Take your kid and leave." As though 4 years of quiet had finally curdled all the way into this. I didn't fight back. I didn't need to. I stood, walked to Elena, checked that she was all right with my hand steady on her shoulder, and then I looked at my mother and said the only thing I had left to say to her. "You're right that some people bring value to this family. You just have the wrong person's name on that list." Then I walked to the coat closet, got our coats and our daughters, and started packing what we'd brought, while 18 relatives watched Diane Cole's perfect son stop being anything of the sort. Brooke stood up from her seat, quietly, and started packing her own family's things too. She didn't say a word to our mother on her way out. She didn't need to. The next morning, my phone rang at 7 a.m. It was my mother, sobbing, saying she didn't know what had come over her, that it was the stress of the season, that she loved Elena, that she wanted to fix this. I let her talk for a long minute before I said anything. Then I told her the truth as plainly as I could. "You didn't lose control, Mom. You showed us exactly how much control you'd been holding back for 4 years. That's different." She went quiet on the other end of the line. I told her I needed time, that Elena needed more than an apology delivered out of panic, and that whatever came next would happen on our terms, not hers. In the weeks that followed, I made 3 decisions, and I made them without asking for my mother's blessing on any of them, which was its own kind of first. I stepped down from my role at Cole Associates and opened my own small design practice, taking 2 of the firm's junior architects with me, people who'd quietly told me for years they respected my work more than they respected the way the firm was run. I gave the financial records I'd copied to the firm's board, not as an attack, just as a fact they deserved to have. What the board did with the Simmons arrangement after that was their business, not mine. And Elena and I put a down payment, from savings that had nothing to do with my mother, on the empty storefront next to her original bakery stall, doubling Marsh Rye's kitchen space before spring. Brooke and I talk now more than we ever did growing up, mostly because we finally stopped performing for the same audience. She told me once, over coffee, that she used to resent Elena a little too, back when she still believed our mother's math. That value was something you earned by contributing the right kind of currency. She doesn't believe that anymore. Neither do I. My mother reached out again in the spring, more composed this time, asking to meet Elena's daughter, our daughter, properly, on Elena's terms. Elena agreed to one supervised visit at a neutral restaurant, no promises beyond that. It went all right. Not warm. All right. That's where we've left it, for now. Marsh Rye did its first holiday season in the new space this past winter, and the line went around the block on the Saturday before Christmas. I stood behind the counter for an hour just to watch my wife work a room that had never once made her feel like an addition to something else. My mother wasn't invited to that opening, and she didn't ask to be. Some doors you don't slam. You just stop holding them open. It's been almost a year now since that Christmas dinner, and I still think, sometimes, about how long I let 10 days of warning signs pass without doing a single thing about any of them. I don't make that mistake anymore. These days, when somebody I love needs 10 seconds of me standing up instead of 10 years of me staying quiet, I don't wait for the countdown to run out first. If this story hit home for you, hit subscribe. There's a new one every week, and I'd love to have you back for the next one.